What if I told you that the deepest trench in the entire Atlantic Ocean, far darker, far quieter, and far more mysterious than the Mariana might be, hiding something the US military has tried to understand for decades? A place where objects rise from impossible depths, move faster than any submarine ever built, and disappear without a trace, almost as if they were going home. The Puerto Rico Trench. A name most people in America barely hear about unless there's talk of earthquakes or tsunamis. But for those who live near its vast, silent waters, fishermen, Navy personnel, pilots, and even oceanographers, the trench is something far stranger than just geology. It's a place that behaves almost like a boundary between our world and something else. Some call it a doorway, some call it a hiding place, and some whisper that it may be home to a base not built by any nation on Earth. For decades, the US Navy has tracked unidentified submerged objects, USOs, around this trench. Objects that drop from the sky into the water without slowing down, or rise out of the ocean and vanish into the clouds in seconds. Objects with no heat signature, no propulsion trails, and no known physics explaining their movement. And every time the Navy tries to approach them, the same thing happens. They're just gone. Our story begins in 1963, a time before smartphones, before satellites could see every inch of the ocean, before the internet could spread theories in seconds. Back then, the world trusted the military to reveal what needed to be known, and to hide what needed to be buried. And on one quiet day in April, near the Puerto Rico Trench, something happened that even the Navy couldn't bury entirely. The USS Wasp was conducting routine anti-submarine warfare exercises not far from the trench, but the sonar operators started noticing something unusual. A target moving at more than 150 knots underwater. Impossible speed. At first, they assumed it was a glitch. Then it kept moving, turning, rising, dropping, reacting almost like it knew it was being watched. Sonar men stared at their screens in disbelief as it changed direction without slowing. No submarine on Earth could do that in 1963. And no submarine can do it today. The object darted toward the trench as if pulled by an invisible current. Then it disappeared, instantly, no fading, no drifting. 1 millisecond it was there, the next it was gone. Almost like it went into something, or through something. Rumors spread across the ship. Some said the ocean swallowed it. Some said it went into the seabed. Others whispered that the trench, those dark, unexplored depths, was more than just a hole in the earth. But the Navy shut down all talk. Reports were classified. The crew was warned. The story never reached the public. Not until years later, when retired personnel began speaking quietly, far from cameras. But that wasn't the last time. In the early 1990s, something strange began happening off the coasts of Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, and the Virgin Islands. Commercial pilots started reporting glowing spheres rising from the ocean and shooting into the sky at incredible speeds. A private pilot flying from Aguadilla to Florida saw what he described as a ball of light hovering just above the water. At first he thought it might be a rescue flare or a reflection. But then the sphere moved smoothly, intelligently, and at a speed no aircraft could replicate. It plunged into the ocean without a splash. The pilot watched in shock as the water didn't explode, didn't ripple, didn't react at all. The sphere simply entered like the ocean was made of invisible gas instead of liquid. The pilot radioed air control. He expected disbelief. Instead, they responded with something chilling. "We're tracking it." What exactly were they tracking? And why did it seem like the sphere was performing a routine pattern, almost like it had done this many times before? A few years later, in 2013, a Border Patrol aircraft captured one of the most famous USO videos ever recorded near the Puerto Rico Trench. The object flew low over the water, split into two identical objects. Then both slipped into the ocean like stones falling through mist. When researchers examined the infrared footage, they noticed something even stranger. The water temperature around the object didn't change. No heat, no steam, no reaction. Whatever it was, it didn't obey the rules of our world. By this point, local fishermen had their own stories. They talked about nights when the water glowed from below, when beams of silent, blue-white light moved under their boats, when something massive bigger than any whale drifted beneath them without sound. Some said they saw structures deep below the surface, metallic shapes, angles too perfect to be natural. But when they returned later, the shapes were gone. One fisherman told a reporter, "It's like something down there doesn't want to be found now." One question rises again and again. Could there be an alien base in the Puerto Rico Trench? Something hidden under miles of crushing pressure, beyond sonar reach, beyond human technology? To answer that, we need to understand the trench itself. The Puerto Rico Trench is not just deep. It's extreme. Almost 28,000 feet down, deeper than any submarine can safely go. The pressure is so immense that steel collapses like paper. The temperature drops so low it can freeze instruments. And tectonic activity creates constant shifting landscapes. For humans, it's hostile, unreachable, deadly. But for a species not limited by our biology, it could be perfect. Imagine a civilization advanced enough to manipulate gravity or space-time. A civilization that doesn't need oxygen or sunlight. A civilization that sees our oceans the way we see open plains, ideal hiding place. A quiet place. A place where they can observe us without interference, if such a civilization exists. And that's still a big if. The trench would be one of the safest, most strategic places on Earth to conceal activity. Deep, dark, inaccessible, with natural magnetic anomalies that could hide signals. And with the perfect cover, we barely explore 5% of the ocean. The US Navy knows this. Or at least, they know something unusual is happening there. Over the years, leaked documents, declassified reports, and insider testimonies all point to one thing. The trench is a hotspot. A place where something enters and exits our world with regularity. And often, these events coincide with military radar blackouts, electromagnetic anomalies, or sudden sensor failures. But the most disturbing case came from a US submarine crew in the early 2000s, during a classified patrol near the trench. Sonar detected a massive object rising straight up from the depths, not moving horizontally, not drifting, rising vertically faster than any underwater vehicle can safely ascend. The sonar operator compared it to a building being lifted straight from the sea floor. The crew braced for impact, thinking it would collide with them. But at the last second, the object veered away with impossible agility. It disappeared into waters so deep that the submarine couldn't follow. The crew was shaken. They knew they had witnessed something far beyond classified military technology, but their report was buried. Again, so what is actually going on in the Puerto Rico Trench? There are three main theories. 1. These are natural phenomena, misunderstood geological activity, underwater gas releases, or bioluminescent organisms. But this theory falls apart when confronted with radar data, military sensor logs, and objects moving intelligently. 2. These are enemy technologies. But no nation, not even the United States, China, or Russia, has anything capable of entering the ocean at thousands of miles per hour, splitting in two mid-flight, or rising from 28,000 feet with no structural damage. 3. These objects are not from our world, or at least, not from the world we understand. If an alien base exists and again, we cannot prove it wouldn't look like our bases. It wouldn't need oxygen, or light, or temperature stability. It could be a structure made from materials we have never seen, using physics we barely understand. It might not even be a structure in the traditional sense. It could be a dimensional rift, a gateway, a place where objects shift between states we can't perceive, but one thing keeps appearing in case after case. These objects act with intent. They move with purpose. They avoid confrontation. They seem to know when they're being watched, and they always retreat to the same place, the trench. Why? Maybe it's strategic. Maybe the depth gives them a shield. Maybe they've been there far longer than us before. Our civilizations existed before our continents took shape. Maybe they were here during the Ice Age. Maybe they watched the first humans emerge. And maybe they still watch. And if they do, why stay hidden? One idea suggests that humanity isn't ready. Another suggests these beings simply don't care about our existence. But there's a third possibility that's far more unsettling. They stay hidden because they don't want to be interrupted. Because whatever they're doing down there, studying, waiting, mining, harvesting energy, we are irrelevant to their mission. But then comes the most chilling thought. What if they're not hiding from us? What if they're hiding from something else? Something far larger. Something far older. Something that uses the oceans of multiple worlds as stepping stones. When you combine all these stories, all these sightings, all these inexplicable radar contacts, a pattern emerges. A pattern that seems less like isolated incidents and more like activity around a base, a hub, a station, a place of origin. And maybe that's why the US government avoids the topic. Not because they know everything, but because they don't know enough. And because the truth may not be that aliens are visiting us. The truth may be that they've been living here longer than we have. In the end, the Puerto Rico Trench remains a silent witness. A place of impossible shapes in the dark. A place where light behaves strangely and objects appear where nothing should be. A place that swallows secrets and returns questions. And maybe, just maybe, the reason we keep seeing USOs is because the trench is not an empty hole, but an entrance, a doorway, a home. But here's the question that should keep you awake tonight. If something truly lives down there, if something intelligent has claimed the deepest part of our ocean, what happens the day it decides not to stay hidden anymore?